So I remember that very vividly, the men and being scared and fighting them and being assaulted. I don't remember getting run over by a car, but my injuries definitely, and my shoes that I was wearing definitely showed that I was hit. In one instance, it was the most, I don't think I'll ever be that scared again. And then I was out of my body. And I was in this ball of just love. And I'm getting chills talking about it. The amount of love that you ever felt in your human body, times that by like trillion, 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 billion, like all the way, like that is who you are. That is how much God loves you. And so I just started doing healings on myself with the light. I would channel it down. I would send my pain, surround my pain. I would ask God to help me with healing my body.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today I have Dr. Allison Snowden with us. She has had a near-death experience and is now working in healing. She's a doctor of Chinese medicine and is an expert in something called Theta healing. So I'm going to ask her about that and find out more information about that. But thank you so much, Allison, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I love talking about healing, and I love healing, and I love teaching. So thank you so much for inviting me on.
I appreciate you taking the time. Usually I start with everybody and I look at we haven't met. This is the first time we met, so I'm looking at what you're doing now, and I've read just a brief idea of when you had the NDE, but if you can think about when the near-death experience happened, but think about who Allison was before that. And if I
Yeah,
can get a little info on who you were leading up to that moment, even from childhood or however you'd like to share it, just before
definitely.
the experience.
Yeah, like I was, my NDE happened in 1999. So I was 15 years old. And so we're, the research on NDEers, I'm classified as a child experiencer. And so there wasn't much life before that. But what it was, who was I was a very shy, intuitive, empathetic child. And we were talking about this before we started recording, but very intuitive, very empathetic, probably a little bit overwhelmed with the world. I was a mama's girl. I loved animals. I was a horseback rider. I was actually very successful in horseback riding, hunter jumpers. And so I just loved animals. My older sister, Ashley, had childhood cancer. She was diagnosed when I was 6 years old. And from 6 to 15, my sister went through stage 4 cancer. She survived, but then she had a lot of survivors. A lot of people don't know this because surviving cancer is, a success and an event in itself. However, the aftermath of surviving cancer was very traumatic. And they didn't know it at the time, but she had an autoimmune disorder. And so she was really sick. And so for that decade, I was just witnessing this. And a lot of the people that she was in the hospital with died. So I grew up in an upper middle class family. My dad is a surgeon. My mom was a nurse, very loving people, very loving family, but there was a lot of tragedy. And, my sister almost died. And then I watched our friends die, you know?
Mm.
And I think I went to like 11 funerals, like within those years of just kids dying. And then I think my first like adult older person like funeral I went to was when I was 20, you know?
Right.
So my cousin died in a traumatic car accident, and I was about 14 at the time. And I think just how your brain is developing. When you're little, you just accept what you're experiencing is your normal. Everyone, your prefrontal cortex, your brain is still developing. You don't realize like how abnormal this is to go to a kid's funerals or to see your sister suffering, screaming, going through chemo, and you just go through your childhood. And we'll bring this back when I talk about what I do with people, but you're being programmed, your brain is being programmed. This is how the world is. This is what life is. And so when my cousin died in a traumatic car accident, he was the oldest of like our group of cousins. And I think was like, what the F? Like, what is life about? Why is every kid around me dying? And I mean, that intellectual answer was, well, because they had cancer. And but like I was just like, why would a God um make kids suffer and take these kids' lives? And so I had my own existential crisis.
Mm.
Um, and so I started praying. And, in 99, the internet wasn't, very big. In 99, there wasn't a lot on manifestation, so bringing us back to 99, we were just starting with the internet. I think we had one computer, AOL, but so the amount of information around death, I'd never heard of near-death experiencers or anything like that. I was raised Catholic. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, in a suburb, so pretty sheltered life. But I just started to pray, and I was asking God, what was the point of life? Why are people suffering, and what is it like to die? And whenever I teach my students about manifesting, I'm like, watch what you wish for. And like literally, I can remember praying, I want to understand what it's like to die. And I would cry and fall asleep crying and praying to God, because like no one else's answers really like didn't feel like the truth, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Right.
I mean, my parents really had no answers for me. I was like, why did Ashley have to have cancer? Why did Andrew have to die? Why why does this happen if a God loves us? And they were like, I don't know, my parents like loved, they weren't, my parents are very loving, ethical human beings, but they weren't very spiritual. And in my NDE, I get more to my parents and why I chose them. But um, I just was asking those questions, and I really, no one had a good answer. And so I just prayed about it for about a year and a half. And I didn't really realize that I was asking for a near-death experience, but I did, and so that happened. Drew died when I was 14, and then right before my 16th birthday, I was on spring break. My sister had just been in the hospital. She had just been hospitalized for like 2 weeks. They found out she has this autoimmune disorder where she has like half the um, immune system that most people do. And we had already booked a trip to Mexico. And so they were like, she can't go to her spring break, but my parents had already paid for it. And like the tickets were booked. So she did not have her doctor's approval to go. And they were like, if she gets sick or hurt in Mexico, like the hospital there's are horrible, like do not go.
Mm.
Um, and so that was the setup for my NDE.
Wow. Okay. So, wow. You were around a lot of illness, sickness, death at a young age.
Yep.
Not a lot of people have that. Like there's some times where it happens. I had one childhood girl that I liked that ended up passing around 12 years old, and it was horrific the way it happened. And um I think I buried that away. and then dealt with it later when my own anxiety around death started coming out and I went through some issues in my late teens. I think that's when it started to really come out. But when you have it constantly coming at you, and then you have a sister who's ill, I can see how that could be. You don't even have time to be triggered, really. You would have just been in survival mode the entire childhood. So I
Hmm.
can see that that would have been something that would have built up. And
Yep.
then, obviously you find yourself at this place where you're questioning everything by 16. Some people are doing that around 60,
Right.
so if that, right? So anyways, wow, that's incredible. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that you had that much trauma around you as a young child. So okay. So leading up to 99, so 99, you're turning 16. I think you said your
Mhm.
sister had just got out of the hospital or was in the hospital.
Yeah, she was in the hospital for like 2 weeks. They just diagnosed her with this CD4 autoimmune deficiency. Her infectious disease doctor was like, absolutely no way you're going to Mexico for her senior spring break. I had just gone and did a like 3-week horse show in Florida and I decided that I really wanted to go to these the indoors. It's like the qualifying one of the top horseback riding competitions. And so I just decided to do that. And we were all going because my mom was like, my oldest daughter is not going to Mexico by herself, because that's a thing in the States to go to Mexico for spring break. And so I was a sophomore in high school. And so my sister was a senior. And so, like, just at the last minute, she was in the hospital like 2 weeks before we were supposed to go. And so she was like, no. And so that was the setup. And then underneath that, and I think, I played the part pretty well. I could shut it down. I don't think I really, really expressed. I really compartmentalized things. Like I would have my talks with God at night, and I was really, I think, depressed and
Mm.
suffering. But I was I also had dyslexia when I was younger, but I think I got safety in performing and doing what I could to feel a sense of safety and control in pretty much a world where I didn't have anything that way. But from the outside, upper middle class family, I was great at horseback riding. I was successful. I worked real hard in school, got straight A's. So I think from the outside, and like my older sister, she didn't look sick.
Mm.
She looked healthy, but she was really sick. And so there was a lot of suffering underneath the surface. But I think especially in this Instagram era, I think a lot of people, take things at face value, but like, there was a lot of pain that was going on there.
Right. And so but you were doing things. You said you're going to this horseback riding. It was a
Competition.
competition.
Yeah.
And so you're still doing things in your
Yeah.
life. So you're kind of just going with the flow. So let's lead up to what happened. Let's lead up to how this happened. How did the accident or whatever it was that happened in 99 happen to you?
So it was very eerie because, my leading up to that, we got into Mexico and I had a friend and then my sister, my brother, my dad was on call as a physician, so he didn't come, and my uncle and my cousin. So, and then all of my sister's friends were there, and I was close with them. And so but I was with like my mom. We were like in the Marriott in Cancun. But it was one of those eerie times. I think it was on the fourth night. My NDE happened, but like we got to the airport in Cancun and we had to get in two taxis, and like we literally almost had like a fatal car accident. Like
Wow.
it was like, whoa, like we were like, whoa, that was intense. Nothing happened, but it was like one of those things. And then the next night, I saw we were on a bus during the day, and there was almost a car accident then. And then like the next night we were coming out of dinner, and I can remember, I still have this like seared on my brain. I walk out of the restaurant, we were in the downtown Cancun, and they have this gurney and they're lifting up this guy, and there's a ton of blood and his like leg is hanging off. And I just like, I walk out and I'm like, oh my God, and I just like turn around, but I still can see that in
Yeah.
my brain. The next night, I was young, so I was almost 16, but my mom would let me go out. I'm sure like a lot of people have a judgments around that, but tabling that, I would go out with my sister's friends, but we'd have to be home at like 11. And I'd have to come into my mom's room, tell her I was home. And then, I'd go into my own room. And I was out with my sister's friends and I lost my friend. So the friend that I brought down there, I lost her and I just freaked out. Like I was like, she's my responsibility. Oh my God. So I just like pretty much had a panic attack and was like, I need to go, I need to find her. So it was the only time I left by myself. So I was walking by myself, and my memory, and this was a huge part, a huge point of contention between my parents and I, the years following, because I got hurt in Mexico. You don't get like a police report.
Right.
I didn't get my clothes back, so like it's not like you don't get a police report. You don't really know. I can't concretely say really what happened to me. It's my memory versus the police's story, which that was told to my parents. So my memory was I was attacked and assaulted by a group of men. Somehow, I got run over by a motor vehicle, and that's what killed me. So I remember that very vividly, the men and being scared and fighting them and being assaulted. I don't remember getting run over by a car, but my injuries definitely, and my shoes that I was wearing definitely showed that I was hit by something that was going very fast. They said probably about 60 miles per hour because like my bones were really crushed. But I was declared dead at the scene. And some people asked me, how dead were you? And I was like, well, I mean, dead enough to arrest someone for killing me, but not dead enough to like be taken to the morgue,
Right.
So I remember waking up in an ambulance, but I don't, this happened in Mexico, so we don't really understand what happened to me, nonetheless, of like how long they did CPR or how long I was out cold, but enough to where they arrested a man for killing me. So uh, that happened. And so I always say that this is like the most scariest time in my life. Like in one instance, it was the most, um, I don't know, I've seen evil. I've seen the very negative side of how people treat each other. And in one instance, it was the most, I don't think I'll ever be that scared again. Um, there was that, and then I was out of my body, and I was watching the scene below me, but I didn't really care. So, I ruptured so that my injuries were all on my left side. I shattered my jaw, so I have two plates in there. My humerus, so this is, your humerus, your upper arm bone,
Mhm.
that was just completely crushed in like 200 pieces. Most of my ribs were fractured. My pelvis was broken in 4 different areas. And then my lower leg, my tibia, was a double compound fracture, rupturing my tibial artery. So I bled a lot, bled out. And that my leg, it was pretty much skinned because of the tires or, something that hit me. My parents did, all that they got back were my shoes that were very torn up. So you could see that I was hit by something force, like,
Mm,
the shoes I didn't get a dress. They didn't get my underwear back, my dress back, you know?
right.
So I had my purse, but all the money was stolen. Um, my mom found me. It was a miracle she found me. It was like some like med, like what is it? Like a medic. I think they were from California. I guess they jumped in and grabbed my purse. They jumped into the ambulance, and they were the ones who were responsible for calling my mom. And so I had my ID and the Marriott room key. And so they were the ones who called, my mom they were like, they're taking her to surgery, get down here.
Mhm.
So that was like the surrounding situations of my NDE. The actual NDE was amazing. I
Right.
mean, the NDE, I was like, after I was out of my body, I was like, I looked down and I was way up. There's some NDEers that are like kind of hovering around.
Right.
I was like, get me out of here.
Right.
I was like way up and I was like, I don't care about what's happening earthside. I was like, I needed my rest. I needed my, you
Right.
know, I wanted my little, like, I used to volunteer in hospice because I know a lot of people are afraid of death. I was like, it's the best vacation ever, man. Like, ugh, like,
Right.
so I say, like, I didn't, of course I was afraid during the attack, and like, fighting these men. But like when I was out of my body, like I re-remembered everything. So I like re-remembered, I always say re-remembered because you never fully forget who you are. I think a lot of us, you have that, we're born with that amnesia and you're like, wait, like, am I a human?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
can remember, I don't know if you guys have had this, but like when I was little, I can remember, and maybe some of your listeners can resonate with this, but I was already having awakening symptoms even before my NDE. I can remember like looking in the mirror and being like,
Right.
I'm a human. Like, I kept on asking, who am I? Who am I? Like, the world wants to, you know, like typecast me. Oh, I'm a white, Caucasian, blonde, my name's Allison, blah, 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 all of these externals. But I was already like looking into my eyes and being like, this is not who I am. So who am I?
Right.
So that was happening before my NDE. And when I was up there, when you're in that dimension, in my NDE, I was not on an astral plane, meaning, I didn't, some NDEers have these visions of, you know, like it's like you're on the astral plane. It's like we're here, but it's like it's a vibrational. It's not, you're not in the flesh, but it's a representation of you being in a human body. Some people see Jesus or their ancestors. I was on a dimension where it was just pure energy. There was no visual component. And that's really hard for humans to get, but it made sense to me. And so I was just this, if you think about it, non-visual energy, i.e., consciousness. And when you're out of your body, you're just like, I just sprawled. I just was like, oh, I can remember just feeling so free. And I was in this this ball of just love, and I'm getting chills talking about it. I tell people that the amount of love that you ever felt in your human body, times that by like trillion, 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 billion, like all the way, like that is who you are. That is how much God loves you. And you are a part of God. We just broke off and we forgot and we became human. The world tells us we're XYZ, we're our skin color, our gender, our economic status, you know, all of these different things that say who we are, but it is not really telling us who we are, which is this like this piece of this infinite light that we are. And so I have a conscious memory of being back, I say home, back in that safety and that love, and where all illusions drop and everything is very crystal clear, you know. Even now being back in a human body, you know, I know some things, I know a lot. I'm pretty psychic and intuitive, but some things are still a mystery. But I do know that everything makes sense when I'm at that point, and it will make sense when I go back and, you know, have a life review. A couple of the things that came back that were very strong, that I like to tell people is everything is recorded.
Hmm.
And everything, it was very obvious to me. Everything, every thought, every, you know, inner struggle, every motivation, every intention, everything is recorded. And I re-remembered, I re-remembered when I was up there that in between lifetimes, I would like study myself, you know? Oh, that was the other thing. I grew up Catholic. I'd never heard of reincarnation ever, ever. I was never exposed to that. I grew up
Mm-hmm.
Catholic. You live one life, you die, bam.
Right.
Yeah, like I'm getting like chills. I was up there and they're like, "Do you want to see all your past lives?" And I was like, "What?" And it was just they're like this electronic that was like this electronic book that had all of my thoughts, all of my life, like all everything external and internal that had ever happened to me. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of information.
Right.
Like, oh, I studied that before. And then there was this feeling where I was like, oh, I remember before being born, you know? I was like, oh, I remember. I remember why I chose my parents. I had some karma to clear and to heal with my mother. So an amazing way to do it is to become a daughter of someone you want to, you know, clear karma with.
Mm-hmm.
And also my parents were very ethical, loving people. They're very Midwestern in the best sense, you know, okay, Allison, I don't care what happens after you die, like help me with the dishes and why don't you go help the neighbor, you know?
Right. Right.
Like very grounded because I was like, you know, like, what is this about? And they're like, no, like go make your bed, right?
Right.
So I definitely um so I get a lot of kickback when I tell when I say that a lot of us choose our parents because a lot of people are born into families maybe that there's abuse, and I work with a lot of trauma survivors. I work with a lot of women trauma survivors because I'm really good at healing trauma. Um, and obviously I had a first-rate education.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
nothing educates you more than your lived experience, even though I love academia. And obviously, I am slightly obsessed with learning, you know, getting a PhD takes a little bit of a nerd, you know, to want to spend all of that time doing that. Um, and I still always am learning and reading because I just love information and I love applying information. But um, I definitely, so like when I was in that dimension, there is no time and space in that dimension. And so that's really hard for some people to conceptualize. But if you think about it, this dimension that we're living on, this physical reality, if you pull it, I don't know why this makes sense to me, but like if you create time and space, we can have this opportunity to expand our consciousness, to grow and learn things that we can't really do on that other dimension because all is known, right?
Right.
And there is no physical body, like there is no physical body, you're pure energy. And I didn't know where I began and where I ended because everything is so interconnected. When we're here, when we are here on this physical plane, like you and I, it looks like we're separate. There's this illusion we're separate. But what I found out when I was on the other side is that like I am everyone, and everyone is within me. And that took a long time to really digest as a kid and as a person, because, and really how to apply that knowledge, my spiritual experience into everyday life. Like,
Mhm.
what does that mean? Do I then go out of my way all the time to help people and, forget myself? How do I apply all this knowledge that I had and spiritual understanding into my day-to-day life? That was very confusing for me, for sure. So I was up there and I remembered that like my true identity is this light. And and when you're in that space, I'm speaking with my vocal cords, but I'm also telepathically connecting to you and to like the audience, so I can send them, my message through energy. But as we're recording and, on through the computer, I'm using my voice. However, like when you're on that other dimension, you're just psychically communicating. You don't have no vocal cords, you have no physical body. So it's just this pure knowing.
Right. Wow. Okay. I got a few things to ask.
Yeah.
So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, this is the first time I've heard your story. So, if you've shared it before, I haven't heard it. So, I purposely don't dig in to my guests because it makes it more authentic when I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
Um, okay. A lot of questions. So, you said a few things that I want to just touch on really quickly. One of the parts that you mentioned is that the experience, the dimension of, you said it was kind of like an energy dimension that you were in, and you
Mhm.
said there was no visual. Now, you went from being above your body and seeing your body. Do you recall the transition between that and this non-visual dimension?
It was super quick. Like the transport mechanism that goes from in your body to out to these different dimensions is super quick. And then also when I was in that dimension and then I decided to come back in my body, like I feel like it's like quicker than light. Like
Okay.
it is the fastest thing I've ever been through. It was like there and then, I'm there and then I'm in my body. I'm in my body and then I'm like catapulted up. The interesting thing is that because I've listened to other ND, like in 99 when this happened, I didn't tell anyone for like 2 years because I literally thought someone would have put me in a psych ward.
Right.
I think, I don't know, it's more talked about now, but like I had never heard of someone who had died and come back. I knew my parents were very concerned about what happened to me. And I specifically was like, do not tell them. They will my mom's a nurse, my dad's a doctor. They would be like, yeah, they already were concerned with my mental health after what had happened to me. I
Right.
was sane enough to be like, absolutely, I'm not telling the psychiatrist, the counselor, no one. I was like, lips sealed. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. that the first person I told it to literally was an act of God, because I was like, I am taking this to the grave. I'm not telling anyone. They're going to lock me up into a psych ward. Nope, not doing it. And um, I want out of nowhere blurted it out. And I remember it because like I was like, what am I saying? Why am I saying this? And I couldn't even control my speech. But it was like an act of God where God was like, tell your story. And it was this random occurrence where my friend took me to his ranch, or like in, I lived in Missouri and I loved horses, and I was still on crutches like several years after this had happened. And his random uncle showed up that day just because he had this feeling he wanted to go to the ranch, their family ranch. And this guy, I I didn't know, it just blurted out. I was like, I have lived multiple lives. This is like against my, or this is not Catholicism.
Hmm.
Um, and he was like, oh, I had an NDE too.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So how that translates into me is like, guys, like your soul, even all of our programming, all of the social conditioning, like there is a part of you that knows the direction, knows what's happening, and also knows your soul recognizes another consciousness, also recognizes itself. And it's like my soul took over and was like, this guy, this is the perfect person to tell this to,
Hmm.
because he had one and there was a soul recognition in his presence. He didn't even have to tell me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to verify your experience, I had another guest on my show who did quite well with the audience. A lot of people like her episode, but I won't get too into it. But basically, she had the same thing where she was very a type of person who she was atheist beforehand, actually, a little bit different than you, but basically had this idea that I can't tell anybody, and out of nowhere got this inclination to tell her hairdresser, and
Still,
the hairdresser's like, I've had an NDE, and same thing. So there's this, you
soul,
know,
no.
right, there's this soul knowing of, okay, who can I trust to talk to this about, and then afterwards it would, and then you get that confidence, and then it kind of like push you. I mean, now you're talking to a lot of people about your experience. So, and this
Well,
video, who knows where it'll be in a couple of years. So the whole point is
well,
that it expands. It's a ripple effect, right? So,
well, and it's funny because I didn't really talk much about this for a while because this happened in 99. I I would share it to some people, if God told me to. I like volunteered in hospice because I just loved to like being that person to like help, because there's a lot of people that are afraid to die. And I'm like, this is great. So I felt like a little fairy angel in hospice, volunteering, and I would tell it, when I was told to. But it wasn't until it was like, I think it was after I graduated from grad school. So, I mean, I'd written everything down really early, but like that was sealed in my diary and no one was getting access to that. But after grad school, I had this meditation and God was like, what? That wasn't just for you, Allison. You talk about it. And I was like, what? And it was like, no, this is for others. This is not just for you. Share your story. And I was like, what? I have to?
right.
And I mean, I was like, okay, like, because I think it was like I after grad school, I started to talk more about it. And that's when like social media was getting a bit bigger. And I was like, well, where do you want me to talk about, So I feel like I always like if someone invites me on their podcast or something like that, I just feel like I'm doing what I am not supposed to be doing, but yeah, because God told me, like this is not just for you, this is for others, and this is not, this experience was to be shared. So I was like,
Right.
yes, when you when 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 you have that divine voice that's like, do this, I'm like, oh yes, 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 I will. Okay. You
Right,
know,
right.
I mean, I don't like, even though like I was very shy and I didn't want to share about it. I mean, I think at that point, I didn't really care what people thought, because I think once you've crossed over, and that's another part of it, is, a lot of people forget, why we're here and forget the important things. And I mean, even more now than in 99, we're distracted
Hmm.
uh, by a lot of things that really at the end of the day don't matter. And I think one of the big things that, God or my higher self, shared and I re-remembered was, you are not, your body, you're not your mind. You exist outside of this dimension, this physical body. And, who you are is this energy that is beyond all words and descriptions. And so is everyone else. And also the point of life, obviously, is to live and grow, but also to love, loving yourself and like loving others. And in this dimension that we are human, we have to learn how to master our emotions, our thoughts, and we have different experiences that we get to apply our knowledge to and learn and grow in different ways. And obviously, I believe or I know of reincarnation. And so there's many different lives where you experience different things, and that grows your soul and your consciousness level. Um, but I think, that was the main message is, love yourself, love others. Everything else really doesn't matter.
You've said a ton of amazing things here. You've said that when you left, the all the illusions dropped. You
Hmm.
mentioned that you said basically that you had seen this book, this electronic book of past lives, which I love the way you describe that. So that's really fascinating. Before I
Like
ask
the
about,
cloud. It's like the
there's
cloud. It's like stacked in, it's like, woo, I'm like, that's a lot of
so
information.
were you aware of the different individuals you were and everything? Because it
Oh
probably just
yeah.
came crashing back, right? Because you
Oh
said
yeah.
everything is so quick too. You just knew you had all the knowledge at once,
Yep.
essentially, right? You
Yep.
when you did come back and you said that you didn't want to tell anybody and you came from this Catholic faith and all this stuff. Did you come back immediately with the understanding that, wow, we exist beyond this life? Like, I think back to all the things you said. You lost all these friends growing up. Your sister was
Uh,
ill. You probably, I mean, I'm surprised you didn't get the same kind of fear around death that I had. Maybe you did, but you would have come back with this different understanding, and it was private to you. You were not sharing it.
mm-mm.
I bet you saw the world different because now you're thinking like, um, wow, I know why we're
Felt like
here now.
I felt like a little bit like an outsider.
Hmm.
I felt I was like, uh-oh, I'm gonna be found out, like it was
Right.
like,
Like
right?
you're not allowed to know this stuff. And you're just like, uh-oh, I know this stuff now. And I'm
I was
keeping it to
like,
myself. Did you
I was
did
like,
the fear of death immediately drop?
oh yeah, completely. I'm like,
Hmm.
I mean, I was like, death is easy. And actually, that's the other thing I found out. I was like, death is easy. I also remembered, like, I can remember looking at my dead body, that, this body, like, I call it my costume, this life, my costume, this life, which is weird because, like, some people are like, oh, you're so pretty. I'm like, it's not who I am. This is so annoying. Um, I
Right.
mean, I've been ugly people before in past lives. Like, it's like, yeah, whatever.
I've been ugly people before. I
Like,
love that.
I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's
Right.
not who I am,
Right.
But of course, like, we're, like in a materialistic, capitalistic, slightly toxic society that has lost our way. That is capitalized or that is like, oh, that's who she is, or there's all these assumptions that come with that. Which it has its advantages and its disadvantages. And also bringing back to this, I didn't realize if you guys can think about this, I didn't see my face for like 3 weeks. My whole tongue was swollen. I could hardly talk because my whole jaw was shattered. I had surgery. I still have two plates in my jaw. Um, when people came to see me in the hospital, grown men would just bawl. Like my my dad, like people that I've never seen cry would just start crying because when I came back from Mexico, I had to have surgery there
Mm.
because my leg was that much out of my skin and I was bleeding. So I had to have emergency surgery in Mexico, which I was extremely scared about because I thought that they were going to cut off my leg. And the hospital I was in was very on one podcast, I kept on saying third world, and some people got very offended by that. But what I'm saying is that it's not the hospital I was in was not a hospital that you are in the States, meaning it was not very clean. I had road rash and gravel and blood caked and dirt. My hair was so knotted and there was blood, um, dirt, and it was in one big ball of mess. And I was covered in blood when I came back, and they didn't wash me at all. Um, so when I came back and people looked at me, I was like, wow, must look like a monster. Like
Right.
I didn't ask my mom. I knew I had surgery on my face. Um, I didn't ask. So I had this perception that like I was gonna look very, very distorted.
It's interesting because you mentioned a couple things. Actually, again, going, I don't know why this video overlaps this other video I was referring to before, but we were talking about, society's views of how you look pretty or not pretty and how you've had different lives and you've looked different in different lives. And depending on when we live, what is pretty in one time frame is different in another time frame, right? So
Yep.
like it's all ingrained up here as to what is good looking. And I've had this conversation before because if you look at the history of human beings, it wasn't always, sometimes you look at what was in at a time and you're like, that was attractive at that time. That's not
Right.
attractive now. So why did we find that attractive? So
Right.
depending on when you're existing, different things are attractive. But going back, you grew up with that mindset. People thought you were a girl, and here you are at 16. You have this horrific situation, and then you have the men in your life, like you said, that hadn't seen you this way, or just people in general that hadn't seen you this way, and they're looking at you, and you're thinking, "Oh, this must be bad." If
It
they're
was bad.
if
It
they're
looked, they were
crying,
crying.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're worried that I'm not going to be who I was before.
Mhm.
And so that's scary. Did you
It was
have a lot of
scary.
fear around that when you were here about that, or were you still
Well,
recalling what
it's
just
kind of,
happened?
I feel like I was just kind of like, you know what, whatever, that's not who I am. I think all near deathers, after we come back, we're like, whatever, like that's not who I am. Um, and like, I kind of was like, I was pretty critical. And so I didn't really get out of my hospital bed for 3 weeks. And it was extremely painful the first time I got into a wheelchair. And I still remember that. I almost passed out because the pain was horrific. Um, and I got into a wheelchair and I'm like, oh God, here's the mirror. I had not I had not seen my face. I had seen my leg and that looked really gross.
Mm,
And I had seen everyone's reaction to what I looked like. And I think it took my hairdresser, God bless her, she came in. It took, I think, like 24 hours, and I mean, not straight, but to detangle my hair because all of the trauma I'd been through and the blood and the gravel, like it took them, she had to, not shaving my head, but she had to like comb out.
mm,
They washed my hair, they combed it out, and I can just remember her just taking like took took almost like a week of her working on my hair. Um, so I didn't really know what to expect. I knew because of I had lived in the hospital with my older sister. I knew we were in St. John's in St. Louis, Missouri, and I knew because I know hospital rooms because I, was in one for so long with my sister, that there was always this mirror right after entering the hospital room. And so I can remember my mom pushing me in the wheelchair, and I was like, "Oh God, there's the mirror. We're gonna be right here." And I can remember being like, "It's okay, it'll be okay." And I like look, and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't expect to recognize my face."
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh, there I am, really, really swollen." And I had like one scratch, like I had a like you can hardly see it now, but it was just like a little stitches right here. And I was still swollen because my jaw was broken, but I had surgery at that. I was post-op with that, and I was like, wow, I was like, I recognized myself. That was a shock to me because I thought my face was going to be mangled.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, there I am. Oh, this is a surprise. I had already had an ego death that like I was just going to be kind of like looked like you know, maybe very mutilated. And so I was like, oh, that's strange. And so it's kind of weird because like if you would like meet me, like I'm in Miami Beach right now, but like I don't look like I've been through that much trauma. I have like a very slight scar on my arm. I have, a scar and part of my hip was taken out for another surgery. And then my leg, I have several scars, but like most people don't like if you'd see me out in, in the wild, in the real world, no one knows that I had been through such trauma
Hmm.
and we had to relearn how to walk 6 times because I had so many orthopedic surgeries that failed, so I don't look it's kind of interesting because I kind of feel like I'm, undercover a little bit.
Right. Yeah, because you've had this, yeah, you had this experience. You're walking around, nobody knows you've had this experience, and it gives you different insight into life, like completely,
Yeah.
right? You came back, you had this, you obviously had to recover. You
Oh
said you
yeah,
were in crutches
that
for a
was a
long
bit.
time, and it was a terrible recovery. It sounds like it took a long time
Oh,
to get
long
to
time.
to a good place. But it sounds like it absolutely shaped your life. Like this experience completely shaped your life because I look at the things you're doing, and was there a struggle to get to that point, or did you know
Oh,
right away that you wanted to heal, or what was a little bit of that experience
yeah,
behind?
like so right before thanks, you're like right on my wavelength. So right before, I'm in this energetic knowing and I like am looking down and I see like this lifeless body and I was like, you know, um, but I was like, that's gonna take a lot of work. Like,
Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall,
damn, I
you
was
know.
like, she's in pieces, a
Right.
lot of pieces. Um, and I mean, your soul is so freaking resilient. Like you're like, whatever, I got it, handle it. Now, when you're Earth side, you're like, what the hell did I sign up for?
Right.
Why did I co-sign on any of this? I was like, wait, I had, like I said, buyer's remorse. I was like, no, I don't want to be here in the hospital. I don't want to go through all of this stuff. Can I do a do-over? Can I like go back? And and God was like, nope, you sign, seal, delivered. You're in here, and I was like, damn.
And
And my
you felt those answers when you would think
yeah,
it?
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. It was like, sorry, nope, you know why you're here. And I'm like, ugh.
Mm.
And I was like, this is gonna be really hard. And my angels are like, yep, 10 years, you're gonna be in pretty much hell. So hang in there. And I was like, ugh, I was like, this is
Wow.
not, they're like, do not give up. You're gonna be going through it. And I was like, okay. I mean, I was just, I mean, just physically recovering and relearning how to, I mean, I was an athlete before, like I would run 6 miles a day with no issue. I was jumping horses over like 4 to 5 foot jumps,
Right.
and then in one day, I can't even like get up and lift my body up to like pee, I couldn't move my big toe. And that was excruciating to get. I still have a little bit of a lag on my left big toe. I kind of sometimes trip if I don't have shoes on. But I had some nerve damage with that. So, I go from being this, you know, I mean, I didn't even think about my body. I just did it to the point where, then it was like the opposite, where it took 3 people to get me up so I could go into the bedside commode to pee, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a very hard physical recovery. But before I came down, God told me, I was like, okay, I remembered that I wanted to have this near-death experience, and like part of my dharma, karma, life mission is healing. And God, before I just, I said quicker than light, it's like you think I'm going back and just all, you're like catapulted back into the body. Um, God was like, bring this vibration down to earth. And I was like, what? I was like, how am I supposed to do that? And so I was like lying in bed, and I was like, in so much pain. And I was, I mean, that was shocking. It's just shocking. I can remember even 2 years later, I was still physically recovering. So I had 2.5 years of orthopedic surgeries, like back to back, and then it would fail. My bones were so broken. They kept on having to redo surgeries because they were so, my orthopedic surgeon said, he was like, I've never seen such crushed bones on a living person before,
Mm.
so um he was like, people who have this severe of like broken bones like usually are brain dead or die. And my poor mother, every time we would go to the orthopedic surgeon, he'd be like, I don't know how you're alive. And I was like, I know. Like, I don't know. And he's like, and your brain's okay.
Right.
Like that was the other weird thing, is like there was such a force that, pummeled my bones, but like my brain was okay, which is like, he's like, how did you not have like internal bleeding, or like how are you not brain dead? It's like,
Hmm.
I mean, I did have a concussion. I had some memory, not memory, but like short-term memory, which is normal of concussions. I took my ACT on a ton of pain medicine in a wheelchair in chronic pain. So that was funny. I actually scored really well, and I was like, damn, I mean, what if I was just regular healthy? What I would have scored.
So when you talk about how you work with people with trauma
Mhm.
and like survivors of trauma, I mean,
Mhm.
you were surviving through trauma through your education as well. You were moving through it and learning, but also still recovering.
Yeah,
So that probably gives you a good basis of some, I mean, not everyone, and people have different types of injuries and different types of trauma and different types of things they're dealing with, right? But that probably give you a really good understanding of what it feels like to be in that situation.
it is. And I think, I survived that, the violence that got me to an NDE. And that's the other thing, is that's really interesting, because like I know who I am on an energetic level because I had the NDE. The weirdest, most trippiest part is then having a pre-trauma body and brain, and then having the experience of me not having a body and not having a nervous system, and me just being a soul, which is amazing. And then my soul then being back into a traumatized brain and body.
Yeah.
Very, very different. experiences. And so I feel that, and I'm very blessed that I have that because I know I'm not my trauma, but I've got to there's the trauma of the incident of, the physical, you know, sexual trauma that happened before and the physical fight around with the Ben there. But then also, the force, because I was definitely hit by they said maybe a motorcycle, a car, but we have, I don't have a police report. We have no idea. So then there's that. So there's the trauma of physically recovering, but I gotta say, emotional healing and also the trauma of what happens. Trauma is what happens, but trauma is also what doesn't happen. So I deal a lot of the people I work with, and also of like the trauma of what happened to me and me having memories of things and then my parents being like, oh no, that didn't happen. And this is what the Mexican police said happened. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. And having to reconcile that, and then also surviving the medical system in America, that a lot of people don't get out of the medical system sane. Um, I mean, I was given a ton of medication that I could have gotten addicted to, but that didn't work with my brain chemistry, thank God. But I was diagnosed with, I mean, PTSD,
Yeah, of course.
CPTSD was not a thing. I was heavily medicated by psychiatrists when I was younger. And I was like, I'm not going to live like this. So my adventure in healing was because no doctor really gave a shit enough, and really no doctor, most doctors have never been through what I've been through because it takes a ton of energy and focus to heal. And you don't really have time to go to graduate school if you're, healing nonstop. So um, I kind of took it upon myself that, you know, going back to my NDE of God saying, bring this energy down here, and anchor it into earth. I was like, well, first I have to give it to myself. So I just started doing healings on myself with the light. I would channel it down. I would send my pain, surround my pain. I would ask God to help me with healing my body. My doctors were like, you're always going to be in pain. You're never going to be able to run. I mean, I call it the doctor cursing. And I say this with, so much love in my heart because I come from a family of doctors. I love all of the people who helped me heal, but at the same time, I am very critical of our medical system.
Mm.
And it's coming from a place of love. And I feel like I kind of have a right to have that criticism because I lived through it. And what I see with our medical system is it's not healing at the root. It's Band-Aid healing. It's not trauma informed. Um, and a lot of people, don't know how to be with people who are in pain and also how to relate and how to give people hope. And a lot of people take on, if a doctor says you're always going to be in pain, they take that on as truth and then they manifest it in their body. So
Yeah.
luckily, I had the NDE and the conscious memory of it. And I'm like, they're not God. They
Hmm.
didn't see what I saw. I saw my healing. I saw my healing before but I knew I was going to heal. Like I saw me running in the future. I saw myself pain free. And so, but here are these doctors saying, oh, that's not possible. Get used to being in pain. I was like, are they smoking something? Like,
Right. Right.
who do they think they are?
Well, it's the same sense of people who like Anita Moorjani, who was told that's the end, like she's gonna die. And I don't know if you heard Anita Moorjani, but
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
famous NDE, stage 4 cancer, almost dead, told, no, you're gonna go back and heal, and went back and healed. And she talks about that a lot, about how not just her, I don't want to put it words in her, what she says, but a lot of people, you got to be careful what you're told and then take that as the
Please
end, because then you're
manifest it.
you're manifesting it. So you can manifest something completely different. So,
It's
um,
it's it's interesting with hers. It was like, because I heard her talk, and I've talked to her because we've been at NDE conferences together. But I was like, my NDE was like, because I had hers, she like miraculously healed and all this stuff. I had my NDE, and then I felt like I went through hell,
mhm,
and it
mhm,
was like God was like, hold on, you're gonna go through this whole. I felt like that was a education and initiation process too, to live through, chronic pain. And then, I mean, I
mhm,
had such nightmares and PTSD from, obviously what had happened to me, in Mexico. And I was like, I'm holding on for dear life and, trying to heal this nervous system and this brain and this poor body that had been through so much. And I was like, I get it, but I want to heal this so I can live my life. And I
mhm,
think with trauma, when I work with clients, I see their soul, I see their energy. I know they're not their trauma. The problem with our healing system now is that people get so over identified with their trauma, their story, they forget who they are. And also the brain doesn't like to forget what hurt them. And
mhm,
so you are not your body, you're not your brain, but FYI, your soul is attached to a nervous system that operates on this operating system.
right.
And the fact is that our brain has very primitive systems in place for our survival. And so if you have been emotionally neglected, abused physically, or sexually abused or traumatized, your brain is remembers that, or maybe it doesn't and it's repressed it, and maybe then you get breast cancer or you get other things that it get expressed some other way,
Mhm.
but the body remembers
And it,
every.
yeah, and it holds on to these traumas. And going through what you said, because you said it's interesting how you came back, different story from Anita, so you came back and experienced this. And I guess the real question was, I look at what you do now, and you have this trauma healing type work that you do, and it might lead up to this theta, um,
Mhm.
based stuff that you said. I think it's theta healing.
Mhm.
And I'd like to talk a bit about that. But when you're talking about releasing trauma or releasing chronic pain, letting go of chronic pain, I'm sure you've probably seen people do it, and that just probably raises the awareness. You've done it yourself. And I
Mhm.
get, to answer your question is possibly your blueprint, your life journey was different from Anita's in that you were to learn how to get through that yourself so you could help others get through that. And
Yep.
so that would be the way I would look at it, whereas Anita's is a different story. It's a little bit
Mhm.
different. So, but we all have these different journeys. So, could you dive in? I know that you do the Chinese medicine. I know that that's something that you can share if you'd like, but
Yeah.
I'm curious if that has anything to do with the state of healing or what the
Yeah.
difference is between the two.
So, you know, I I've always like pulled in that energy from my memory and from that soul memory of my NDE, because that's home, that's who I am. But we are in this physical, beautiful planet. I mean, what an amazing, I mean, I'm actually like looking out like on the ocean right now, when I'm like just outside my window. Beautiful planet. We're in this physical body and we're here to love ourselves and love others. And I really do feel like this is such an amazing time to be alive, because 20 it's been 25 years since my NDE and no one was talking about this back then. I know I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, this earth, all of this stuff, it's like doomsday. But I'm like super optimistic about what's going on, I really do feel like we're at a critical time where there's going to be a mass awakening and remembering of who we are. I do feel like there's a lot more of spirituality being talked about and who we are. And so I just feel really positive about life. And I think after going through what I've been through, I'm not really scared of anything. I'm not scared of death. I'm not scared of, you know, anything really. So, but it's taken me a long time to work through that. But with the Chinese medicine, so my healing journey was my dream was just to live without physical pain. I don't know if you've ever had any type of pain, but it really occupies your consciousness. Yeah, that's like all you can think about. Like, so I just felt like I wasn't present with people because like my hips hurt, my legs hurt, my arms hurt, like my brain, then I was having these flashbacks. PTSD is such a, I would not wish that on anyone. It is, I tell people who have had PTSD, CPTSD is chronic, or it's like chronic PTSD. It's usually happens with relationship trauma. But I also see it with people with medical trauma, because it's like when a child is abused or in a toxic environment, there is no way out. And so it's a repetitive trauma. It's not just one trauma, but it's trauma after trauma, neglect, abuse, sexual trauma, any of that. So there's a lot of, and just to destigmatize trauma, it's very common. There is a research study that is, and I always encourage everyone to fact check me. We live in information age where you can fact check, but also, I think we're in this age of massive amount of information, and we have to learn how to think critically about these things. But there is a study that talks about how it's called the ACE study, and it's adverse childhood events, and you can take a quiz online. It's not the end all be all quiz, because like on this quiz, does it say, did you watch kids die of cancer? No, but that's a trauma, but they don't have that. So I feel like I have more ACEs than if I would just take the test, but you have to start somewhere. And what they found is that they studied these people. These are middle-class people with insurance. So this is not even like the most impoverished in America, but a lot of people, middle-class people with health insurance, experience a lot of. And what this showed was the more adversity that you have in childhood, there's a higher correlation of A, dying earlier, and B, having any and all of the chronic diseases. So here in America, I know because, we just had the whole, C word, I don't know with that, but that kind of distorted reality. But really, there's a lot of chronic disease, and that is actually correlated with adverse childhood, because when you have adversity as a child, that shapes your nervous system. What shapes your nervous system is, and your experiences as a child creates a mapping of how the world is, and it also is programming your subconscious. And what they found is the more adversity that you had when you're younger, the higher correlation it is to get cancer, to have asthma, to have chronic pain, to have heart attacks, to almost, if you had a lot of adversity when you're little, you're like, if you have high ACE scores, like you're 9 times, like you die earlier. So how does this correlate back to what I do is that my dream at first was just, I worked 10 years just on being pain-free and to walk without pain and to actually run without pain. And I literally, when I was in grad school when that happened, and I mean, I was acupuncturing my leg all the time. I was massaging it. I was working on my healing. When I could run without pain, I was like, woo! I was like, I just was sobbing. I mean, I don't know if anyone, I don't really care if anyone saw me sobbing, but I would run in San Diego and I'd just be bawling and it wasn't because I was sad, but it was because I was so happy
Right.
because I could run without being in pain, and
Right.
it's just amazing. And so Chinese medicine helped me get there, but then I kind of hit a wall. I had been through a lot of therapy. I had in been to some of the trauma people in the world, because my parents, like, they wanted to give me the best chance to heal. It didn't. I had all these different trauma therapies that really actually didn't work, and I was like, am I just like, defective? Like, why isn't this working for me? Um, and so I just never give up. And because I saw my healing, I saw my complete healing. So I was like, okay, well, I have to try something else. And so I went through Chinese medical school, which is like 6 years long. And then I was always I did functional medicine, I did a lot of nutrition. Um, but I was like, why do I still have these night terrors? Like and which is weird, right? Like, because I'm not afraid. My soul is fearless. Like, but like my brain like couldn't let go of what had happened to me. And I was
Mhm.
just like, oh my God, here we go again. Like I was just like, come on, brain, like how do we forget about, like I want to live life, right?
Right. Right.
And then it's like my brain and my nervous system was like pulling me back to these like emotional realities that I don't like. I knew what had happened to me, and I was trying to heal so I could be present, so I could create a beautiful life. And it's like my trauma kept on like yanking me backwards, and it was frustrating. And I can remember just being overwhelmed, always overwhelmed. And I was like, why? And so I I had been practicing, I think, for probably about 6 years, and I just hit a wall. My PTSD came back, and I was like, oh my God, this is like what, I would have times where I was super happy, I was doing great, and something in my environment or something would like trigger just my PTSD, and I was like, and so all of my tools weren't working, and I was really scared. Because if you know PTSD, if you don't, like that, it's almost like living in hell. So people that have had that or have gone through that, I've a very big place in my heart for those people, because it is one of the hardest. I would rather break my legs 500 times over than go through, that
Yeah.
PTSD. It's awful. But so I was like, okay, God, like help me. I know I'm not the only person that's gone through trauma. And if I'm suffering, there's a ton of people suffering. So I was like, help me, God, like really just show me. Somehow I like went on the internet and signed up for a theta healing course. And I took it, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I am back home. So theta healing, it was created by Viana, who I've trained with over the past 5 or 6 years. I love her so much. And she's also a trauma survivor. She didn't have an NDE, but she came from a very abusive family. And so she actually started creating theta healing in 99 too, which is kind of weird that there
Oh,
is a
weird. It's a
parallel,
weird overlap. Yeah.
right? There's a lot of things that was happening in 99. So she's older than me, and she started creating theta healing. And so basically, theta healing is taking the vibration of unconditional love and healing your subconscious, and healing your body. And so I took the first theta healing class, and I was like, I read her book, and I was like, yep, yep, true, true, true. She channeled this whole healing system, and it's very simple, and it works super quick, and it changed my life.
Wow.
And so I don't practice Chinese medicine anymore. Um, this is just, it's really interesting because I was practicing Chinese medicine, and it's the one time I didn't really listen to my intuition. God was like, this is your gift. Like, this is what you're good at, and you need to spread this. And I was like, yes, I agree. But I was working full time as an acupuncturist, doing functional medicine, and then also sprinkling this in on the side and like trying to build up my practice on the side. And I'd seen this vision where I was teaching this and eventually teaching other doctors and getting this into hospitals. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it will at some point in my life. And God was like, just do this full time. And I was like, no, I'm not quitting my job. I still had to make money and live in this world, and I was fully supporting myself. So it's just funny. My life. So I was like, okay, so I was practicing this. I ended up getting like a stem cell shot to help my knee with my knee pain, and it went septic, and I ended up in the hospital bedridden again. And I
Wow.
had to relearn how to walk again. And that's when I started my online practice. And that's when I kind of was forced to um, just start doing this medical intuitive and emotional healing because like I couldn't walk again. So weird how the universe works. And then that just took off, and I've been practicing this for just the theta healing and the trauma-informed theta healing for about 5 years now.
Wow.
And so I teach people online. I teach other doctors how to do this, but Viana thinks that everyone should be able to self-heal. So unlike other trauma therapies or things that are offered, you don't have to be a medical professional. You don't have to already be a healer. So my classes are open to anyone who wants to learn how to self-heal. And I honestly think that in order to really thrive and survive in this world, because um, you have to have some baseline of like understanding how your subconscious works, how you can be a true creator of your reality, and how you can heal yourself and you can connect to God. You don't need me. You don't need any priest or any guru. You are a direct channel and it's your God-given right to connect to the energy of creation and to own it and to harness it and to create inner peace, because that's all I wanted.
So you help people with this theta healing. This is what you're doing. Thanks for sharing all that. It's interesting to hear your whole journey because you've done so many different things and you've learned the different paths of everything. Obviously, there is a place for Chinese medicine. Obviously, there is a place for all these different
Therapy.
therapies and medical interventions, but you're really looking at it from an energetic place now. It really seems, and obviously it's doing good because you're helping people and you're seeing the changes in people.
Mhm.
So that's amazing. Where do people find you? I'm curious, how do they connect with you if they want to connect with
So
you?
I'm on Instagram. I think my goal this year is to get on YouTube and try to I have because of all the physical healing and emotional healing, I was like, I really want to. I mean, I was bedridden for a long time, so I used my imagination to heal myself. So I was like, ooh, I want to share this with like the world, just so I can't work with everyone, but that's something I can share my story and I can share maybe my meditations. And but I'm on Instagram at Dr. Allison Snowden. And then my website, my school is called the Awakening Institute. But also you can just go to Dr. Snowden, and that's just DR and then SNOWDEN.com. And so I work one-on-one with a small group of people, and then I have healing classes that are through theta healing, and I also teach it from like a trauma-informed perspective as well, because that's just very dear to my heart, because I feel that a lot of people that haven't been through the type of trauma I have, a lot of people want to do good with people, but a lot of people are ignorant about trauma, and frankly, some people really damage people even further by not being trauma informed.
Hmm.
So I really love educating people on the nuances on, how to really help yourself and help others, because currently in our culture, there's a lot of victim blaming, of a lot of victim shaming, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of emotional lack of literacy with trauma informed language, with healers, with psychologists, with doctors. And so that's one of my passions, is really because our words do matter and how we talk to people does matter, especially when you're vulnerable. And so I'm kind of on a mission to like help people heal so they can actually embody who they are, because what happened to you is not who you are. Um, but I can't sharing my NDE story can help wake people up, but everyone, I really feel like on this planet has to do their own healing work.
Yeah.
And reading about NDEs doesn't do it, because how your brain and your body is set up is your body is highly conditioned, you know, from even in your mother's womb up to 6 years old. There's a ton of adults that don't think they have trauma, and they're unconsciously projecting it on everyone. Let's just
Right.
be honest.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I do want to say the beautiful thing about what you're doing, and this is because I know you're saying there's a lot of crazy stuff in this world, and I totally agree with that. I'm a, like what I would call like a severe optimist. And
Oh,
so
me too. Me too.
yeah, so I
Totally.
just see everything going though, it's like you can't see the light unless you've been in the dark kind of thing. And I feel like what we've done is we've been falling and falling and falling. And you're a perfect example as to what's coming, in my opinion. And coming from someone who's younger, like you haven't been practicing and you're not like a doctor in your 70s or 80s or anything like that. Like this is something like you're going to see more of this. You're going to see
Yeah.
people coming out and doing different types of work and energy. And doctors, even the word doctor, I think, is going to emerge and change over time. I mean, I'm seeing it happen all the time. And I think that you're right. Not just listening to NDEs or reading about NDEs is going to help you. It can give you insight. And that's why I love the beauty of hearing someone's story. But someone like yourself who is also encouraging people to work through their own traumas, I think that's really important. And if we don't, it leads us down a bad trap.
Yep.
One of the last questions I always ask everybody, especially people who've dealt with the NDE or had an experience like this, is really to ask you what comes from your heart right away when I ask you, what is our main purpose to incarnating here?
Love. Loving. Yeah.
Just loving.
Loving.
That's our
Loving.
main.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
It really, I mean, our hearts, I really feel our heart, like the technology of our soul. It's so interesting because, like, here we are, we're talking, we're having this conversation, over the internet, through technology. But what I really hope happens and what I see is really us re-remembering the technology of our soul and our consciousness, and to
mm,
awaken that, not when we die, but as we're living, and to remember and to hold that in our heart, and really creating first heaven within yourself. And you do that through walking through the dark, looking, having those ego deaths that, I think in the spiritual awakening path, you have that, oh my God, I'm so horrible, or I'm the only human that's ever gone through this, right? The rejections, the abandonments, all of that, and realize that this is part of the human experience, and you just move through it. You don't get stuck in it. And really creating more of a loving environment that resembles that love that we came from. And I think love is such a powerful, it is the creative force that creates everything beautiful. And I think when we can remember that even us as imperfect human beings, that we're so worthy of giving and receiving love and respect, and like from ourselves and to others. And I really hope in the future, I'm not like holding my breath on it. I mean, that we create that this can spread like wildfire. And I mean, I would love to be teaching more people this because I really want people to remember who they are and the power that's in their heart and their soul.
Oh,
And the only way that people can really do that is, I mean, through an NDE, a spiritual awakening. But I really feel like there is a softer, gentler way. Because I just gotta say, I mean, going my NDE, I mean, I'm like, damn, I did that, and I'm
right.
like that that was not easy. And
Right. And I always encourage that. I'm always like, we don't need to go through that in this life. This is why Soul Inspired was created, because I'm trying to bring the messages to the mass. I do see it getting bigger and bigger, and I wanted to kind of, I know I love talking to people who've had these experiences, and I think it's going to help so many people.
and you know what? Also, here's the thing too, is that, you know, NDEers, like I mean, I love all different types of religion, but let's just be honest, a lot of religion divides people. But us NDEers are the true seers of who God is. And I wish that, I mean, all of us, if you ever go to a near-death experience or conference, and yes, there are those, and I did go to a lot of them. I've taken a couple of years off, but I mean, we're just like, we all say the same thing. It's like love, like God is love. That is it. And God's love has been, you know, I kind of think of a prism and that creates rainbows of different religions. But
Mhm.
if you look at all religions, they you know, they have these core things of love, and then you have a little bit of ego projections. God does not punish. I'm sorry, you know, if that breaks anyone's concept of God. God is just pure love, and we are also creators within our own right. And as we ascend and descend into our body, into our nervous system, as we awaken, we remember the God part of us and get out of this amnesia, you know, that we kind of temporarily have here on Earth. And I really feel like you know, religions and maybe governments have, you know, emotionally manipulated people, maybe currently, to hate each other, you know, to divide and to objectify people. And I think that still is happening.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
was just gonna say it is happening, but I do believe that I think you look at technology, you look at information, you look at the fact that there's even this, that we're having this conversation, that it's out there. And I think as more and more this continues, it's gonna awaken people's belief, because when you have that thought of like just something just makes sense, you're just like, oh yeah, even though I haven't experienced an NDE, everything she's saying totally resonates with what I'm saying. Once you get enough people on board with that and they understand it and they feel it, it's not even a matter about what someone's telling you anymore. It's what you feel inside, right? So
Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this is, and we were talking about this is like resonance, right? Like you're like, this feels right. Your soul's like, uh-huh, uh-huh. And 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 I feel that we're having this awakening to where you're like, yeah, the words they're saying, like that resonates and the energy that feels true.
Hmm.
And I really feel like and I see this with myself and my students, as you pull off the imprints of trauma,
Hmm.
and all of the conditioning, sometimes I psychically see it as people are just like pulling off these layers of what life has told you who you are, these layers of pain or these armor around your hearts of past heartaches. So I just feel like everyone's just like, especially in my classes, it's just like releasing that. Like, this is not
Yeah.
who I am. And as we do that, we change, and I'm getting like huge chills. We change and our perception changes. And
Yeah.
once your perception changes, and once you expand your consciousness, it can't go back.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. I want to thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate you taking the time. I I feel like I could talk to you for like 6 more hours if I'm not lying. I'm seriously going to be reaching out to you again. There's
I'm
no
such a
way.
talker whenever you want to
It's
talk.
okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. And I want that. I just what I'm gonna do, we are gonna reconnect because I think you'd be someone who'd be amazing to be back on.
It would be
I
fun. You
yeah.
know what I was thinking about? I was like, oh, this would be kind of cool to have like people call in and ask questions. I was just like, I just
Oh
got this
my
like,
gosh, you're the second person to say that. That's like that's really bizarre. I keep getting this. So
I feel like
I
that's
feel
what I
like I
got.
want
I
to
got
do
it.
like yeah, I almost feel like I want to have a number of people like experts on and have something like a live session. I think that would be really
Yeah.
amazing. An audience out there, if you think that's a great idea, put it in the comments. I always get people to engage. I
Yeah.
always I like to turn to the audience and say thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for liking and sharing these stories. Please, please, please share these stories with people
Yeah.
so that they can continue to heal and find people like Allison. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on the Soul Inspired today.
Of course. Thank you guys for listening and just sending everyone just like so much love in your heart and just sending that out there and that you're so loved and that like you are, you know, that part of you is like within you and just sending that keeps on growing and you keep on growing that love within your heart and sharing it with others.
So